Hello everyone and welcome to Cutie Pie Collective. Last time I showed you how I made these lovely overlay crochet heart squares. Today I'm going to be showing you how I construct those squares into a crossbody bag. There's multiple steps in this process, but I personally really like this way of joining squares, so I hope you will enjoy it as well. So for how we lay out these squares, just to get a general idea of the shape, we use two of our squares folded in half into triangles on the sides of our bag, and then two squares for the main body of it. We're going to be connecting them down one side seam, across the bottom seam, and then up another side seam. I'm going to start with a slip knot. Now, when I started this process, I was pretty confident myself to being able to keep track of my stitches, but yeah, after going for a while, you'll see that I decided to give up on that and switch to using stitch markers. Now we're going to start each seam at the very corner. An easy way to find that is to pinch the double crochets that make up the block of our corners and then shift in 2 stitches, and that should give you the very corner. We're going to be working only with the outside loops. And what we're going to be doing is just slip stitching these squares together. Yeah, again, I was struggling and out of frame. I apologize. So here we go. Again, we're just slip stitching all along the sides of our squares. Again, going through only the back loop of each square. Technically, it looks like we're going in through one back loop and one front loop, but considering we're doing these squares wrong sides together, it's both back loops. You can also just think of it as slipping through the loops that are close together and then slip stitching them together. It was around this point that I realized I was probably going to have a hard time keeping track of where all of my stitches were. So I tore it out, and again, we're going for the very corner, and we're going to add stitch markers. Stitch markers for the win. I add them to each corner stitch on all of my squares. Again, if you are more confident at being able to keep track of where all of your corners are, you do not need to use stitch markers, but for beginners or people like me who believe I can count until I start doing a project, I do recommend using stitch markers. Alright, so again, we're going to be going down the side and then across the bottom. Now it can be a little bit easier to tell where you're going to be starting. You're going to be starting at the very corners. Again, back loops only. Yarn over, pull everything up. I like to flip the tail out of the way, and then you're just going to pull through. Again, these are slip stitches, not single crochets. So just slip in through both back loops, yarn over, and pull through everything on your hook. I personally feel like finishing and attaching your squares in this way looks very natural. And I really hate sewing projects together, so anytime I can avoid having to get my tapestry needles out, I will do so. And we're just going to continue these slip stitches all the way down our project until we get to our next corner. Now once you get to your corner stitches, you're going to once again go through the back loops only, do a slip stitch, and now we've done the entire side seam. We're going to pick up our other main body panel and we're going to go back in through each of our corner stitches, adding our new panel between the two we've already connected. So that first slip stitch at the corner was just sort of hold those two squares together so we can more easily add in this third. We're going to slip stitch through all three, and then we're going to move our side panel aside and just continue slip stitching our two squares together along our bottom seam. Again, this is back loop only. Different types of yarn can look a little different as you go along. And since this red is kind of fluffy, I would usually sort of hold the squares apart a little bit just to sort of help give me more of a view of what I was doing. Again, I apologize for going off screen. My setup is not ideal, but I'm working on upgrading it, so stick around. Hopefully you'll get to see it looking better. We do these slip stitches all the way along the bottom seam. Again, once you get to this corner, you're going to slip stitch the corner together, going through both back loops, slip stitch, shift those stitch markers, Now, again, we're going to add our next side panel. Going to bring it in and sandwich it between our two bottom panels. We're going to be going up the side. But first, we're going to go through, again, all of these corner stitches. Have all 3 on there. Slip stitch through them all. We're going to drop this one middle panel and work exclusively up the side seam. Again, just slip stitching back loops together. I find this to be much easier than sewing because you don't have to cut a length of yarn and worry as much about tying on or tying off. It's also great because you get to work as you go and you don't have to worry about cutting too long of a piece or too short of a piece. You just work with whatever yarn you have left over from your project and slip stitch things together. Right, again, we go all the way up, back to this corner, marked by our stitch markers. Go in, slip stitch, and now that we've finished this side seam, we're going to chain, and then cut off. Our yarn with plenty of room for weaving in later. Pull through and tighten. Now we've finished both these side seams and the bottom seam. Now we just have to finish 2 more side seams. One side seam here, and one side seam here. You'll notice I still have loose ends on the inside of my bag just because I like to weave all of my ends at the same time if possible. So I've left it till after constructing. And in case you're wondering, here's how I like to make my slip knots. Take a hook, cross over and loop under. So you get a little twist, pinch the twist, yarn over, pull through the loop. I think it's one of the fastest and easiest ways to make a slip knot when starting a project. All right, now we match up our corners once again. Insert our hook into the back loops only. yarn over and pull through. And remember pulling all the way through to make a slip stitch. And just start again, slip stitches all the way down the side seam. Things can get a little bit tight once you get down to the bottom corner. You could work from the bottom up. I like to work from the top down just because any weird messiness I like to have at the very bottom. And we actually end, I didn't remove the stitch markers from our bottom corners from before because we're going to end with a slip stitch through those bottom corners once more, followed by a chain, and then we cut and tie off. I just wanted to add that extra little bit of support and stability at those bottom corners. And then after you have those done, you can remove that stitch marker, reminding you where those corners were. You can see that's what the seams will look like. I think it looks very clean and it's not too terribly obvious either. The slip stitches help blend in with the rest of your work and looks very natural. Then for that end, you can just tuck it inside the bag for weaving later if you want. Now we have one more seam and our bag will be constructed. Starting just as usual. Slip into our marked corners and slip stitch, flicking that tail out of the way. And slip stitch down our last side seam. Again, once we get down to the very bottom, we're going to go back through those previously marked corner stitches, do a slip stitch, and then chain before cutting and tying off. And there you have it. Your bags are now all constructed and stitched together into the rough shape of our bag. Here's a bit of a closer look of how it looks, all tidied and neat. Again, I really like how these seams look. I also went ahead and wove in my ends. I haven't trimmed them yet because I plan to line this, and I figured a little bit of extra wiggle room isn't a bad thing to have. You do not need to line these bags, in my opinion, just because it is pretty tightly woven with it being overlay crochet, but I always worry about something like a pin or a pencil or something random and small slipping out, so I'm going to be lining mine. Now, because I'm a little bit extra, I want to add another border around the top of my bag just to help sort of even it out a bit and give it a little bit more depth. I'm going to be doing single crochets all the way around the top of the bag. Now, these single crochets will be normal single crochets. They are not in the back loop only. They're plain Jane single crochets through both loops. The only thing that I do a little bit differently is once I reach the corners, instead of doing one stitch for each corner, I'm going to do 2 single crochets together sort of situation. This is another reason why I left those stitch markers in even after I finished the sides, just to help keep track of those stitches. Now again, I'm going to be trying to pick up both loops here. I go through, yarn over and pull up, then again try to find both loops. It's a little hard to see once they're all stitched together, but you're going to try to find both loops. It's a little fiddly. There's one. And there's 2. Again, yarn over, pull through, so that you have 3 loops on your hook, and pull through all 3. So again, it's like 2 single crochets together kind of situation. Other than that, it's pretty basic single crochets all the way around. Now I've jumped ahead here a bit, just to try to help keep the video not from going for forever. And when I say single crochets all the way around, I really do mean we're not going to do anything special at the corners. We really are just doing single crochets in each stitch. However, when we do get to that marked corner spot, we are going to be careful to A, go through both loops, and B, we're going to mark that stitch with another marker each row, so we can keep track of what stitch really is our corner stitch. So after we complete that, we'll place another marker in that stitch just so we keep track of where the corner is. That will help us later when we attach loops for our strap to make sure that we're placing them evenly on both sides at our true corners. After that, we just continue single crochets all the way around. I didn't do anything special at the corners and just did single crochets because I wanted to try to help smooth out that bend and not have it be such a strong point for when we attach our bag loops later. You can see it kind of rounds that point out a bit, just doing single crochet straight across. Alright, and now we're just going to continue those single crochets all the way around. I will meet you guys back at the beginning of the row. I decided to go ahead and show you guys how I did the stitches in between where the seams are in our bag. You can see I have this stitch here and that stitch there. Those are those loops I'm going to try to catch. Remove that stitch marker just so I have a little bit more visibility. You can see kinda right there's that loop we're gonna try to grab. Well, first we're gonna do a single crochet here. Don't want to skip one. Now pick up both loops of our corner as best we can anyway. Yarn over, pull through. Only those loops though, not fully. Then we're going to pick up this other stitch here, both loops. Yarn over, pull through that stitch, 3 loops on our hook, and yarn over, go through all 3. And that's what you'll do at each of those seams. Other than that, single crochets all the way around, easy peasy. Alright, I've done a little bit of a cut back to this other point just to show you guys again how I worked those. Again, it's single crochets all the way around. But when we go into that marked corner spot, and do our single crochet there, it's a little bit tight. But after we complete it, we are going to mark it again with a stitch marker. And continue on as normal. Alright, we just have to finish back to where we started. Quick little jump here. So you can see we finished 1 row of single crochets all the way around. Now we're going to continue, but first I'm going to take that very first single crochet, and you can sort of tell which one it is because it'll have a knot at the very end of it from your slip knot before. I'm going to go into that and do a single crochet and mark it with a stitch marker just so I can be sure to find where the beginning of our rounds are. After that, we're going to go ahead and do another round of single crochets all around the rim of our bag. This time you don't have to do anything special at the seam areas, just plain Jane single crochets all the way around. Again, remember to mark your corners after you do them, that way we can find them later for attaching our bag loops. Alright, we've made it all the way back to our stitch marker. And I think 2 rows of single crochets really looks best here. A single row is just kind of thin. And again, you can see we've kept those markers in place, and it's really smoothed out that point at the corner of our bag. Alright, next we are going to go ahead and add another color. We're going to do a round of red after this. And for those who have watched how I do the squares for this project, we're going to do something very similar for attaching our new color. I'm going to leave enough for weaving in, yarn over, pull through our loop, and then tighten that loop down, replacing it with a loop of our new color. Now we're going to go ahead and single crochet into our stitch marked stitch here and remove that stitch marker. Just get it out of the way, single crochet, alright, and now we're just going to slip that stitch marker back in and replace it. We don't necessarily need this stitch marker here, just because it's pretty easy to see where we've started our next row since we've changed color, but it's nice to get into the habit of doing. Now we're just going to continue doing single crochets all the way back around, and I'll meet you back here. Now we have our 1 single row of red single crochets. I'm just gonna finish this real quick with 1 last single crochet, and then doing a little slip stitch back into that first red stitch we made before pulling back up our white a little bit of fiddling, but we're just going to start doing single crochets, and I moved that stitch marker back up to that first red slip stitch that I did before, and now we're just working white single crochets to our corners. This is the row that we are going to attach our bag strap loops. So we've made it all the way to our first corner. Now, the yellow stitch marker is our true corner. I've continued to move it up in the right stitch this entire time. So that's our like middle corner Now I want my bag strap loop to be attached with 7 single crochets. So from the center, you count out 3, and then you will continue past it for 3, so that you have a total of 7 stitches. All of these stitches are going to be worked onto our bag loop. So you can go ahead and remove those stitch markers now, because we know we are going to be doing 7, and we've lined it up properly so that the next 7 stitches will be evenly distributed onto our loop. Now we just go through the ring and into our stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and we're just going to do these single crochets right over and around our bag loop. You want to try to keep these tight if possible, and it can be a little bit finicky. It looks like it won't fit, but I like to try to pack as many of these single crochets onto these loops as possible, just to give as much stability and support to our strap as we can. The more single crochets we have here, the more single crochets are supporting our bag. So there's 4. And again, you can kind of push that loop and compact those stitches. Six. And one more. And it can get kind of tight. You can kind of work this last one on the side of the loop if you need to, and just sort of shift those threads back over to be on the base of it. All right, now you can count. If you flip it up, it's sort of easier in my opinion to count how many you have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there you go. You can see it's nice and sturdy. And now, after you finish that, you're just going to go in straight into the next stitch. Make sure you don't go into that last 7th stitch. It can be kind of pulled apart there and look like it's another stitch, but it's not. To go into the next stitch that hasn't been worked. And then we just do single crochets. And if you want to take a look here, this is how that bag loop looks. It does sort of pooch out the corner just a little bit, having so many gathered on there, but I'd rather have more stitches there and have it be sturdier than do less and have it lay flatter. This bag also hasn't been blocked, so there's a possibility that after blocking, that could lay down a little bit flatter. Now we're going to single crochet all the way around to our next corner, and I'll show you how we attach that bag loop again. Alright, we're back. Now I have not spaced out my stitch markers again, so this will give me an opportunity to show you again how I sort of counted that out. I just removed the stitch marker from the row before and counted over again. Here's our middle stitch. So 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That will be the stitches we work onto our bag loop. So just temporarily slide in that stitch marker there. Just to really be a nice secure way of remembering where we're going to start attaching that bag strap loop. It's also called a D-ring if you're looking for it. Just a D-ring works fine. Begin single crochets until we get to that marked stitch. Then we're going to grab our D-ring, remove that stitch markers, and work 7 single crochets into and over our D-ring to attach it to our bag. Again, trying to keep everything as tight as possible. You don't want to pull up any extra yarn because that helps it be nice and secure on your bag. And again, you can compress those stitches aside to make some extra room to fit in those last couple stitches. Alright, and there you have it. 7 single crochets worked over the base of our loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then continue on with your single crochets, making sure you do go into the next available stitch, not one we've already worked before. And continue on single crocheting till we get back to the beginning of our row. Alright, and once we get back here, we're going to remove this stitch marker, do a single crochet, which might have to wiggle it in there a little bit since it was a slip stitch before, single crochet and slip stitch to join our row. After this, we are completed doing our border, so we can cut off, do another chain, and tighten it down. And we also will cut our second color free, leaving us plenty of room to weave in that end. And with a little shake, here's our bag. Now with a finished border and D-ring loops to attach our strap to later. I think it looks very nice with a finished edge. It looks good just stitched together, but the details matter. It really gives it that finished professional look, in my opinion. And alright, that is our bag fully constructed and finished. Thank you so much for following along. If you're curious, my next video will be showing the next step to this process, going from bag to a bag with a strap. I'll be using overlay crochet to create the strap, and we'll be working directly onto those metal rings we added before. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, let's make something.